Imagine you are sitting on your comfortable synthetic sofa, staring blankly at a glowing glass rectangle. Tomorrow morning you will wake up and surrender exactly 1/3 of the money you earn to a massive invisible organization. If you refuse, men dressed in matching uniforms carrying metal weapons will arrive at your home and physically lock you inside a concrete cage. You do not fight back. You do not run. You call this paying taxes to the government. You accept it as a normal civilized reality of being alive. But let us rewind the clock. 300,000 years ago, if a primitive caveman stood up by the campfire, pointed at a freshly killed mammoth, and demanded 1/3 of the meat just because he claimed to be the king, the rest of the tribe would not pay him a tax. They would not bow. They would quietly wait until he fell asleep, and then smash his skull into a fine powder with a heavy river rock. Equality in the ancient world was not a noble moral philosophy. It was a brutal, violent survival reflex. For 95% of human history, anyone who tried to act like a ruler was immediately assassinated. So, how did a species of ruthless, arrogant, freedom-obsessed apes voluntarily put on chains and start bowing before kings? You probably believe the comforting bedtime story taught in middle school history classes. You think that as societies grew larger, people realized they needed leadership, that the weak masses willingly surrendered their freedom to a strong, noble hero to protect them from chaos. Nature does not care about your bedtime stories. Nature only cares about calories. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans were nomadic hunter-gatherers. You could not be rich. Wealth did not physically exist. You cannot carry a field of wheat or a herd of cattle on your back while walking across the African savanna. Because nobody could hoard calories, everyone had nothing. Therefore, everyone was equal. Anthropologists call this a reverse dominance hierarchy. It is a ruthlessly efficient system. If a prehistoric hunter became too skilled and started acting arrogant, the tribe would mock him relentlessly to shrink his ego. If he continued to act like a boss, they exiled him to starve in the wilderness. If he tried to use violence to control others, the weak banded together, like 10 middle schoolers jumping a playground bully, and murdered him in the dark. The masses functioned as a biological immune system, ruthlessly destroying any individual who tried to become a cancer of authority. Then 12,000 years ago, someone made the most catastrophic, irreversible mistake in the history of our species. They planted a seed. The agricultural revolution is celebrated in your textbooks as our greatest achievement. Biologically speaking, it was a death trap. Farming forced humans to stop walking. You were suddenly chained to a single piece of dirt. The physical toll was horrific. Hunter-gatherers were tall, ate a highly varied diet, and worked maybe 15 hours a week. Early farmers shrank by 6 inches in height. Their spines deformed from bending over dirt. Their teeth rotted from eating too much grain. They worked from sunrise to sunset. They traded health, height, and freedom for a pile of seeds. But farming produced something terrifying, a surplus. Grain could be dried. Grain could be stored in clay pots. Stored grain is not just food. It is physical, measurable power. For the first time in evolutionary history, a human could hoard more calories than they could physically eat. If you have a massive silo of wheat and your neighbor's crops fail, you own your neighbor. You can dictate whether his children live or die. But a giant pile of calories attracts hungry rats, and more dangerously, it attracts hungry humans with spears. The man who owned the grain silo realized he could not sleep, so he made a cold mathematical calculation. He approached the most violent, aggressive sociopaths in the village. He offered them a deal. Stand outside my silo with sharp sticks. Kill anyone who tries to take my wheat. In return, I will feed you. This was not the birth of noble knighthood. It was the invention of the biological protection racket. The first standing army was a prehistoric mafia. They did not protect the people, they protected the silo. The farmer who hired the thugs became a warlord. The warlord realized that if he controlled the food and he controlled the violence, he controlled reality itself. He called himself a king. To stop the starving peasants from slitting his throat in the dark, the king needed to upgrade his security. So he invented the ultimate psychological weapon, religion. He told the masses that an invisible, all-powerful ghost in the sky had personally chosen him to guard the wheat. If you attacked the king, you weren't just a thief. You were an enemy of the universe. Religion and the state merged into a single, unbreakable shackle. Ancient cities were not built as centers of culture. They were giant open-air prisons. The massive stone walls around early cities were not built to keep enemies out. They were built to keep the taxpayers in. Kings were not divine saviors chosen by God. They were the apex predators of a domesticated human farm. They realized that humans could be fenced in, bred, and harvested for their labor. Exactly the same way humans harvested wheat. We became livestock. Look at you now. You are perfectly domesticated. You sit in your climate-controlled box. You spend 40 hours a week generating abstract digital wealth for a corporate warlord who does not know you exist. You proudly identify yourself by your job title, your 9-digit social security number, and the invisible borders of your nation. The primitive hunter-gatherers who assassinated tyrants are completely gone. They have been replaced by a population that will argue on the internet to defend the billionaires hoarding the modern silos. The physical chains of the ancient empires rusted away long ago. We simply replaced them with psychological ones, mortgages, credit scores, and monthly subscriptions. You think you are a free, highly evolved citizen of the modern world, but biologically, you are just wheat, waiting to be harvested.